So we watched some things, as we do.
Thanks.
Yes. We watched 2 films. That's what we did.
And generally it's 2.
Yeah.
2 is the normal.
2 things, yes. So the first thing that we watched is Coherence from 2013. If you have not watched this movie, or either movie actually, make sure you watch them before you listen to this episode. You know the rules. But also just like, it's a good film.
Yeah, no, we didn't have to save the little tagline that said, oh, this film sucked.
Yeah.
We actually liked them. They were good. They were good films. They were a good time. Totally worth it.
Yeah. Yes. So Coherence is directed by James Ward Burkett.
Mm-hmm.
Burkett. Strange things begin to happen when a group of friends gather for a dinner party on an evening when a comet is passing overhead. So that is the basic description, which is like, when I watched it, I didn't really know anything about it the first time.
Mm-hmm.
Like, because we watch these things now, like, we kind of know, because it's just like, wait, what is this for? And then we're like, oh, I guess there's going to be, like, time travel or something, you know?
Yeah, I remember seeing the trailer for it. What I thought was not as long ago as it was. I did not realize it was from 2013 when I was like, this is about a new film. I remember that. Like, we said we wanted to see it, but then I never remember us going to it. Like, yeah. I don't know. It was very good.
Yeah.
I was lovely surprised.
Yeah, it is great. It's definitely one of my favorite, like, movies. And it's like, I don't really love sci-fi, which we found from doing this, but I do really love time travel and, like, trippy stuff. Like, that sci-fi. I love. I just don't like the action-y, like, their guns and fighting. I don't know. It's just, I'm sorry.
It's okay to be wrong. It's okay.
Ones that are like, you know, where you're like, what's going on? What's real? Am I real? I love those. And it has, this one doesn't have any guns in it. So,
well, there was one.
There was?
Yeah, in the car.
There was a gun?
Oh, I'm wrong.
No, she had a ring in the car.
It was a book.
Oh, the book. Yeah, there's no gun.
There's no gun.
False
My bad.
Cat. You're allowed to be wrong too, I guess.
I watched a different movie. I don't know.
Yeah, so when I watched it the first time, I watched it pretty sure by myself. Just like, because it's just a film that no one else would watch with me. And I was like, this seems interesting. And I watched it, and then I immediately watched it again after going on this, like, Reddit black hole of, like, what the filmmaker did with it. So, like, how it was made in itself. And then there was all, like, the threads where it's like, this one is this, and this one is that. And I was like, what? I gotta watch this again. I immediately, like, in one night, watched it 2 times.
I was 2013, why wouldn't we watch it? And I was like, oh, we didn't know each other yet. It was like a few years before we even knew each other.
Yeah. Yeah. I just enjoyed, like, all the little Easter eggs and the ways that, like, they were improvising, but also things were very, like, intricately woven in there. Mm-hmm. And it kind of feels like, when you learn about how the making of it is, it feels like one of my favorite things, which is murder mystery parties. And, like, I hosted one of those.
Yes, you did.
At our apartment. And it was fun because everyone got their roles, and then they had to, like, kind of play up that character and act like that person did, and then things would happen through the night that people weren't expecting, or, well, I mean, you know, murder's gonna happen, but, like, how, like, some people know things and some people don't, and blah, blah, blah. And I just, like, I love those things. I am a sucker for those things. So the fact that there's an entire film, like, gave me life.
Yeah, it was a good time.
It, like, invigorated me. So essentially, in the making of this, each day, instead of getting a script, these actors were giving a page of notes about their character. So, like, they didn't really have it. They didn't know what was going to happen. This is not scripted in any way. There's actually, like, a 12-page, like, that's like, really not cool. Even like a script, like, just like a general, like, outline of what the director wanted to happen that he had been working on for years. And then he just gives these people their scripts. They have no understanding or idea of what the other characters are going to get. And so this was all so they can get this really natural, honest, like, reaction from them. And it was really like an exercise in them listening to one another, yes-anding, right? And getting engaged in a mystery, which is really, like, a lot of really funny things happen because of it. So there's, like, an instance where the director says that, he says that, in fact, at one point when two of the characters leave and come back to the house and the other actors wouldn't let them in, they were too freaked out. My rule was to not interfere too much if they had an organic instinct. But after 45 minutes of this intense standoff at the door, I finally had to say, guys, you have to let them in, otherwise the story's not going to go. They were so freaked out and just trying to figure out the puzzle, so it naturally led to conflicts and a real heightened sense of tension. But he said that the actors would leave really energized, and they were just, like, on fire from this, like, cool, exciting experience that, like, they didn't know what work was going to be, you know? Like, they didn't know who they were going to be, what it was going to be like.
And you get that, like, high from, like, saying a good joke and knowing it was good, and then, like, seeing how everyone else bounces off. It's, like, a real cool camaraderie thing. I feel like when you really vibe well with someone, that you have it back and forth. Yeah. That's cool.
And, like, you know, as someone who has done improv, like, I totally love when you kind of toss an idea out there and someone's like, yeah, and then, like, they, like, enforce it, and it isn't just, like, you just feel like it's legit. And there's some really, like, nothing is scripted, so there's some really good conversations, and, like, there are pieces that are obviously, like, woven in there on purpose, but a lot of it does seem like just genuinely them being their character, which is great. Like, for example of, like, how things are kind of influenced, there's a part where Kevin, the character Kevin, is trying to leave the house by himself, and M, our main character that we're watching, refuses to let him leave. Like, she's, like, dramatic about it. Like, I'm not gonna let you leave. He's just like, what the? So Kevin, or the actor Maury, had received a note that said, you need to leave, and she had received a note that said, do not let him leave.
Wow.
So it was like them, and then, you know, finally he relented, right? But it was like because that whole scene does feel really desperate. Like, she really is like, I can't.
And
like,
he's so annoyed. He's just like, ugh, you.
Yeah.
I want to go outside and get switched. Why do you care so much about it?
Yeah. According to, like, essentially, like, all the things that happen, so, like, there's a blackout, there's knocks on the door, there's all kind of thumps, there's all these things that none of them knew were going to happen. So they all respond very organically. Yeah. And according to Emily, the actress, her name is actually Emily, after the first mysterious thumping on the door to nowhere, which is referenced, the actors were both scared and very excited about the story that was unfolding. Of course, we knew we were in good hands, but this is when things got really exciting, because we could see how genius and well-planned everything was. We just didn't have a clue. Some other fun things about it is that it was shot in 5 days. And it was shot chronologically, because they just had to do it, like, they can't spoil it for themselves, so they had to do it in order. And it was in 5 days because the director's wife, like, he wanted to shoot it at his house, and the director's wife was incredibly pregnant and wanted to have a home birth.
Oh, wow.
And so she was like, you can do the film in the house, but it has to be in 5 days, because I'm about to have this baby. And in fact, the scenes where Emily is running around outside, or all of them are running outside, was happening while she was giving birth in the house. So just, like, so crazy. Right?
Wow.
The actor that plays Amir, his name is Alex, he is a co-writer and was essentially, like, the mole. And he was there to help, like, them steer in some way so that the story didn't get too far out of hand. There was only 5 crew members, 2 sound guys, the director of photography, and the director and producer.
Yeah, let's go make movies,
right?
Man.
Yeah. There's only 2 cameras.
We know 5 people.
Yeah.
We know how to do camera
That's how
films.
we make every one of our short films.
I know, but, like, let's make this
Each
big
short
film.
has been 3 crew members.
But Gabe, stay with me.
Yeah.
What if longer film
What if big film? I absolutely agree with you.
Long film? Big film?
The director had given them direction, essentially said, like, you can go anywhere you want, we will follow you. right? But he said the only hard thing was that he needed to keep everyone quiet, and it was hard because there's so many of them. And there are times when watching it this time with you guys, I was like, it is really loud. Because, like, there are parts where, like, they're all talking over each other because no one has the line, you know? Like, so everyone's just throwing out whatever they can. And I remember being like, this is really noisy. And it really did feel, like, voyeuristic in that way because it felt like we were watching an actual dinner party because it wasn't so orchestrated. Because it was, I felt like I was I was at a house party where everyone's talking.
It was funny. I remember sitting there being like, I'm kind of stressed.
Right? It was like so much
is happening.
Yeah.
They don't seem like they like each other very much. Why are they friends?
Yeah, why are they doing this? Yeah. So now that I'm done geeking out about how it was made, because that's my favorite part, to be honest. The rest of it is really, really cool. And another reason why I watched it so many times is because there's all these little, like, and I couldn't find the Reddit thread that I had found the first time. Because that had, like, the ping pong is this, and blah, 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 and blue and red and all this stuff. So essentially why this film fits in with this topic is that these are friends who are having dinner, and then there's a comet passing overhead, and it eventually comes to light, or dark, that now all of these different parallel or other alternate universes are... at the same place. They're in this, like, what are those roundabouts called? Like, cul-de-sac. Is the same house. It's the same them. And there's an infinite number of them in other houses. And whenever you go into the black void, which is, like, the center of the street, because the lights go out, it's like a roulette wheel where you just get flung out into some other alternate universe version of your life and your friends, but you don't know. So essentially, pretty much everyone is in a different house, like is in the wrong house by the end of the film.
Except for 2 people, right?
But even still, actually not. Like,
okay.
Yeah, so it gets really, really where you don't know where they're from and how it unfolds is, like, really fun. But essentially one of the theories that I found from a Reddit user named Wow Bao Bao has this, like, he has a few theories. I don't agree with all of them, but some of them. So one of them is that everyone that arrives at the dinner party at different times are from their own different dimensions. Like, he states that it happens before the lights go out. Because, like, comet stuff is already happening.
Yeah.
Like, because of, like, the phones breaking and all of that happened before the dinner party. But reasoning behind it is that he says because there's these conversations in the movie right from the beginning that don't add up. So, like, for one, when Mike, the character Mike, who is played by the actor, I'm totally blanking on his name right now, who actually plays, what's his name, in Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Okay.
States that he was in a show called Roswell. Which, the fact that he's saying he's in the show Roswell for a long time and was a regular is actually a joke to the audience that we're in a different universe from them.
Yeah.
Because he's from Buffy. So it's like... Anyway, so he says, like, I was on Roswell forever. And Lori, who says she loves the show and is, like, a diehard fan, says she's never seen him on the show. So, like, right from the beginning, it's like, does she have a bad memory? Or does she come from the world where he did not go on that show?
Yeah.
Or maybe where he's on Buffy.
Yeah.
Right? Mike also comments about her yoga, Lori's yoga, and she denies it. And she mentions
like, I
she
don't
doesn't
do yoga.
And you said this when she's in the hallway with Kevin later in the film. She's mentioning how, like, oh, I had to do yoga. And it was like... This different Lori.
Yeah, who did do yoga.
So he didn't misremember. So there's all this stuff where people are, like, misremembering things or, like, things aren't adding up. And it's because they're actually all from different dimensions already. Like, it's already messy, right?
Yeah, I think, like, the first phone call, I would agree. That's, like, when it began because they got disconnected. She's arriving. He arrives separate.
Everyone who came, and they all came at different times. So it's like, I would argue that Lee and Mike were the right couple at the beginning. But then Mike left pretty early. Yeah. So no one is with who they're supposed to be with. Anyway, every decision creates a new reality and is not only because they walk through the dark. So this user says that the main idea that people have is that you have to walk into the darkness and then you get spit out
Yeah.
in a different one. But he's saying like every single time, like there are moments in the story that are also like the void. So there are times when there's a blackout or there's like darkness for long periods of time, and you'll see it all go, there's like these rules to the film actually, and so like it all like fits in together. So it's also like decisions that are made also cause rifts and things to change, which kind of brings us to our next film when we talk about it. But yeah, so then the other thing is the ending. So again, spoilers. There's this big thing where throughout the whole thing, there is this similar to, unfortunately, Midsummer, where the whole thing was a breakup, right? That's what this film is, really. And so from the very beginning, the first conversation that Em has with Kevin, he says, like, we need to talk. And then they keep saying things like their picture is cut in the middle. She keeps saying, like, I'm losing you on the phone. She said, I'm losing you. Or I can't let you leave from the door. Like, she keeps reiterating all of these phrases that are essentially like, I'm holding on to this relationship that you don't care about anymore. Yeah. And then also, similar to Mr. Nobody, which we'll get into, she has not made a decision to go with him for a month or to stay and pursue her career, whatever it is. And he even says, like, at some point, indecision is just a no. And she's like, I need more time. So her indecision is also like spurring out all these different possibilities, right? So that decision is why there's so many different M's out there. So in the end, she gives up on this trash Kevin in her trash relationship and decides to go pursue a good Kevin because she knows that because this decision exists, there is a dimension or universe where she has said yes and where they're good. Because she met one of them, right? So then she goes and looks, and she ends up finding a good Kevin, and then she, like, fights the good M, and, like, she drugs her, puts her in the car, then NM, possibly that one, could be anyone, tries to come back and she bashes her in the head and then hides her in the tub. But whoever that was, before they disappeared into whatever in the morning, left a voicemail for good Kevin explaining that this is bad M. So it's like this, so at the end you're like, oh no, she's in trouble. The woman you've loved. Yeah, but it's like, but it is. It is at the same time. Yeah.
She just wasn't sure, and now she decided she is by murdering the woman you love. It's fine.
And now she can be the woman you love.
Yeah, it's totally the same.
Yeah, So another thing that I think is funny about the Schrodinger's cat thing is, so in the story, their explanation for what's happening is that they find a book on like quantum physics that's, super helpful during this time, and it mentions the Schrodinger's cat thing, or mentions like the whole thing, and so they spiral out and they're like, this has to be the answer, that we're
every time they leave
dead.
the house, and then
so they have this whole thing, and the director actually said that he thought it would be really funny because he was thinking of it as like a what is the trippy show?
Twilight
Zone. That in the middle of Twilight Zone episodes, they're always like very like, this is what is happening, like, conversation essentially, where there's like the big reveal. It's like, we explain everything. So he was like, it would be funny if they did that and then it really wasn't the explanation. And that's the case. He says like, that's just what they clung to, and they're completely wrong. And they were just like, this is it. This is our answer.
Don't let them have the book.
Yeah.
They'll have the secrets.
Like, it's pretty cool to see, like, the different versions of them, and, like, Mike's character is pretty great, and, like, how triggering he is. Their ideas to number themselves randomly with the Yahtzee dice, and then use a random object in a box. Like, I would have never thought to do that, and I thought that was really cool.
It was cool, yeah.
So it's like, what is this?
It was a good time. It was a good film.
Yeah, it is super good. But we watched another thing.
We did. We watched Mr. Nobody from 2009. Director Jaco van Dormeel. A boy stands on a station platform as a train is about to leave. Should he go with his mother or stay with his father? Infinite possibilities arise from this decision. As long as he doesn't choose, anything is possible. Yeah. So, like, rude. That thing that the parents did. Yeah. Really rude. You can't put that on a little kid. That's like, it's not okay.
Yeah. So, Mr. Nobody is a pretty beautiful film. It's a little trippy because it's kind of hard to follow. It's very long. It's very hard to follow. And so, it does take a lot to, like, but you get the gist. I think if you're watching, you get the gist. And so, essentially what we have is Nemo Nobody, who's our main character, Jared Leto, who is, when we're seeing him, he's like this old man, and then he reveals that he has the wherewithal to know that he's lived all these different lives. That he has lived sufficiently through every single option at the same time. And so
his face boops.
His face boop. Yeah. So I'll explain what that means. So essentially, because there's a scene where Nemo, as a young boy, explains that before you're born, you know everything. And right before you're born, there's an angel that comes and tells you, like, takes away that knowledge or shushes you and, like, pushes your mouth, which is why you have that little indent imprint on your mouth. And that is like you being silenced and you forget everything that you knew, which was everything. Except they forgot Nemo. And so they forgot to do it to him. So he knows everything. And even like as he's going in some of the stories, he like remembers or predicts the future because all the times are happening at the same time. He knows what's going to happen. And so he is able to live and remember each one of these lives because he is different. And so as an old man, he's reflecting back and, you know, everyone's like, which one is it? Who are you? What is this? And he's like, I'm Nemo Nobody. I am all of them. And so he essentially, being someone who can remember everything and live everything, is the Schrodinger's cat. He lives in a world of indecision because he's in this state of like, he didn't make the decision to go with his parents, or he did, right? He both did and didn't. He exists both alive and dead. Like in some instances, he dies as a child, some is a young adult, some of them he's older. Like, yeah, he is essentially the cat because he's stuck between his mother and father. And so as he lives through each life decision, his choices are smaller and smaller. Like he gets less and less amount of options to pursue because that's just how life works. Like when you're young, there's infinite amounts of possibilities.
Then you hit 30 and you just made a bunch. You gotta do what you got with what you have.
Yeah, you're like, okay, I got 3 roads now. I used to have 20.
My hair looks like this. It's gonna for now. I chose red at 15 and now red is always. I can't be other colored hair. It's just fine.
And so there's even like a part where one of the lives he chooses is so against the realm of possibility. Like he chooses to like never leave anything up to chance. He will make every decision. He will be rich. He will have a pool. He will be married to the first person he dances with at the dance, blah, 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 blah. And so he does that in one of the worlds, and he ends up married to Jean, and he is suicidal because now his life is meaningless. He doesn't have any choices, right? And so he ends up doing this crazy thing where he starts like two-facing it, where he flips a coin to do decisions because he's stopped making decisions. He says, no more, I'm going to let this make decisions, and it results in his death.
He does that and Yes Man. It's like a combination of those two things.
And so there's a lot in this film that are pretty interesting, but there's this quote that I think really ties it all together, which is, every path is the right path. Everything could have been anything else, and it would have just as much meaning. So essentially it's like he, as this young 9-year-old boy who's trying to choose between his divorced parents if he wants to live with his dad or his mom, he's like, which is the answer? What is the best route? And he's like, I've lived all of them and they're all right.
Yeah.
Like, every single one of them is correct. If I choose any one of them, it is correct, which is why he still can't choose.
Yeah.
Because now it's like he doesn't have, like, an answer, right? So, essentially, like, no life is better. They're just different.
Yeah.
You know, and so, I mean, some sucked more than others, but I think, like, they all just had varying degrees, and it's all about, like, if you lived that life, those things suck as hard as they're gonna suck, right? Versus, like, if you live that other life, those things are gonna suck. Like, you aren't living your life this way, looking at that life, thinking that one sucks. Like, you can't, because you're in your lens.
Different, yeah.
So, essentially, because he doesn't make this choice, he's all that. I think there's I went down this, like, rabbit hole of all these different, like, papers that people wrote about Mr. Nobody in relating to philosophy, and it was really fun. And I found some really interesting tidbits, and then went and looked for my own stuff. And essentially, like, we had found it really interesting that in the film, when Nemo chooses to be with his dad, he ends up being really sweet.
Mm-hmm.
Not to say, like, when he's with his mom, he isn't sweet, but he's, like, exceptionally, like, nauseatingly sweet to, like, in some ways.
Very passive, very much, like, just taking whatever life throws at him. Because
he's, like, he takes care of.
Yeah, he's just, like, generally more caring for people.
Compassionate. Whereas, like, with his mom, he's, like, mad at her, and so he becomes spiteful.
Much more angst.
Yeah, much more angst. So, like, we have these two Nemos based on his reality, which bring, like, so when you leave behind, like, this whole thing of, like, choice, what is choice, blah blah blah. There's a philosopher, Thomas Nagel, who essentially believes in what he calls the absurd, which is essentially that, like, we don't really have choices in the way that we think we have choices, and that all of our decisions and choices are determined by arbitrary cultural factors. So, like, we could have infinite amount, but we're actually limited because of where we are and who we are in the world around us. So it's like, it's not really infinite. It's really, like, actually quite limited. And so the choice between his mother and his father is almost, like, chosen for him, because the choice is really an illusion. Yeah.
Well, because he has to pick one, right?
Yeah. And it's like, and like, he's going to pick the one that makes sense for that world. Like, he doesn't really, it's not like this crazy infinite nothing matters choice.
Yeah, I'd say he never picks his dad, because his shoelace breaks. He always just runs for mom.
Yeah. But I mean, he's a little boy, and I feel like you don't, and she was always there. I think the way she turned out was very interesting.
Yeah.
And kind of sad. I think something that's cool is some of the symbolism in the film is like, color is a big thing. So, like, we have the separation of the different women he ends up with, and he sees them as young girls. Jean is in a yellow dress, Elise is in a blue dress, and Anna is in red. So yellow is, like, the color of life and wealth, and when he's with Jean, he ends up rich and famous, or not, well, rich and wealthy and whatever.
Yeah.
Elise is, like, emotional, and so blue is, like, you know, all of that of, like, despair and depression and sadness a lot of times, and then red, the color of love for Anna.
Yeah.
So, like, and those things come through all the time. But another thing that keeps popping up is water. And so he comes to an end from water quite a lot.
That's usually how he dies, yeah.
So Elise has, like, her meltdown in the middle of their suburban world while it's downpouring, and she says, like, she's drowning or whatever, and he says something like, our family will learn to swim.
Yeah.
His whole fact that, like, he can't swim is, like, this thing that's recurring throughout, and it's like he jumps in the pool, tries to kill himself in Jean. He jumps in the pool in the beginning to replicate Anna. That's where he first saw her, was in the pool.
Yeah.
Anna, like, asked him to swim, and he either insults her or he admits what he's doing. Yeah, so, and then also, like, him meeting her at the, like, lighthouse where there's water, like, them picking up the water in pieces from the helicopter.
Yeah.
Like, it's just through there, and, like, water is always, like, this transition. It could be something that's emotional, it's something that's torrid and uncontrollable. There's, like, a lot that goes into what water means, so there's a lot of that. But I think, like, really, what it is about is like that whatever life you live is the life that you're supposed to live. And, as we make choices, we have less and less choices. But the truth is, we didn't really have any choices to begin with. And you just like know that whatever you're doing is correct.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's like the whole other universes or like simulated reality versus not. Either one, whatever your life is, that's your life. You don't just get to pick new life now.
Yeah. And even if you were in this other life, like, you wouldn't know. Like, the grass is always greener on the other side until you're on the other side, and that's just the grass you've always had.
Yeah.
And then it's like nothing. So it's really all just perspective. It just seems like it's better, but if you were there, it wouldn't be any different from what you're doing. And I think that's what Mr. Nobody is saying.
Okay, but like, what if,
okay.
hypothetically speaking, our universe has mutant zombies.
Okay.
And then we find out there's a universe that, has a plague or whatever, pandemic time.
Yeah.
But that's not mutant zombies. I didn't see my best friends and family members get eaten by mutant zombies in the universe that has COVID-19. So
like, mayhaps we
mayhaps
live there now.